And welcome back to Hang Out in the Holy Land, the official podcast for all things Ohio State news and athletics with landgrantholyland.com. I am your host, Matt Brown, and you can follow our wonderful site on Twitter at landgrant33. You can follow me at MattSBN, and you can, if you want to express a question or have thoughts that go beyond just the tweet, you can send us an email at matt.brown@sbnation.com. We are recording the show here on a Monday afternoon here on the 11th, and we've been talking with a lot of other bloggers and representatives from other Big Ten schools or schools that are on Ohio State's schedule to get a little bit more information about some big questions surrounding their program and how they might face up with Ohio State. And we're going to continue that today. We're going to sit down here and talk with a very smart blogger here from a very solid blog. We will be hearing from Josh Henschke here at Maize and Brew, the SB Nation blog here for the Michigan Wolverines. And we are going to be chatting here about all things Michigan football since we have a lot of questions, and he's the man with a lot of answers. So without any further ado, let's go get Joshua on the phone right now. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for spending a little bit of time here this afternoon to be able to answer some questions here about Michigan football. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem.
Let me start here with one of the more interesting kind of questions that I've seen discussed on Twitter, since there seems to be a really big difference between what maybe some national media fans or national media writers are saying and what Michigan fans or people closer to Michigan's program is saying, and that's about the quarterback position. I have yet to see a Michigan fan or a Michigan blogger or anyone insinuate that there's any kind of quarterback controversy or any kind of even real quarterback battle. Like they say, Devin Gardner's the guy, and I've seen a couple of other national writers say, I don't know, maybe Shane Morris can push Gardner a little bit, or we may be seeing Morris as the starter, even if Gardner's not hurt. I'm wondering here, from your perspective, is this 100% Devin Gardner's show? And if there isn't a quarterback controversy, should there be?
It's absolutely Devin Gardner's show. It's 100%. There was never really any type of controversy there. I think it was pretty much overblown, most of it in the national media. I know people like to create storylines, and I think that's what it was. You've got a senior quarterback returning, almost a 3,000-yard passer. It's tough to bench that for someone who just played in a bowl game with a watered-down offense. So it's like I said, it's Devin Gardner's to lose. Obviously, you always want competition at any position, quarterback especially. So, it's good that Devin Gardner has that person behind him in Shane Morris to push him. But Brady Hoke said yesterday during media day that Shane Morris is a backup. So that pretty much says it all about Devin Gardner's role this season.
Yeah, that ought to do it. It's a good position to be in if you have a solid young guy as an understudy here. But Devin Gardner certainly showed in a lot of games last year why he should be the starter and can do a lot of things here that Morris can't, at least not right now. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more of your thoughts about how you think how Gardner's going to fit in here with what I would imagine to be a changed offense, at least schematically now that Nussmeier is the offensive coordinator. Just looking at kind of the X's and O's here and a year here in a new system with the new coach, what kind of changes are you expecting to see out of Gardner? Is it maybe cutting down turnovers the biggest thing, or is Michigan going to find different ways to utilize his mobility, or how do you see that position evolving this season with new personnel and new leadership?
Well, I think overall, a lot of that relies on the offensive line. I think a lot of Gardner's mistakes last year were, not very smart decisions due to the fact that he didn't have very much time to get rid of the ball in certain situations, or he held on to the ball for too long because plays weren't developing. So to backtrack to what Nussmeier can potentially bring, I think Nussmeier ultimately wants Devin Gardner to just stay in the pocket more, to run less. I think that's what they wanted last year, but it just didn't quite happen that way. Don't get me wrong, Devin Gardner is extremely athletic. He can run the football if he needs to be, but I've always pictured him as more of a pocket passer, and I think he can do well there. He's got the body size, he's got the height. He's not like a shorter well, I wouldn't say shorter, but like a Braxton Miller, there's you can see the difference between the two. You know one's a pure athletic runner. The other one's more of a pocket passer type, and I definitely think that's what Nussmeier kind of wants to bring him in with. He's had excellent relationships with quarterbacks in the past. Most recently with A.J. McCarron, and I think it might not click right away with Gardner and Nussmeier, but for future quarterbacks like Shane Morris, and then even go further down the line to Wilton Spate, who's also a lefty as well as Nussmeier. So you've got that relationship there. If everything works out with the offensive line, allows him more time in the pocket, I think the turnovers will just cut down naturally because he's making smarter plays, and plays are developing. So it's kind of a wait and see right now. It's really tough to say what kind of identity the offense, even the offense as a whole, is going to have. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm glad you had mentioned. I had forgotten Nussmeier being a lefty and that kind of connection. And you brought up a point that was going to be the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And this seems to be like one of the big talking points talked about Michigan football last year and what to expect this year. And that's the offensive line. Just looking at things here on paper, looking at the way recruiting services have scouted some of these guys. Hoke has recruited really well in this position group. There's a bunch of people who are big and who are fast and talented, and there's a lot of stars here in this group. But last year, Taylor Lewan's All-American, first round draft pick, by all measures a great offensive lineman, and this line stunk. And I'm curious to know, from your perspective, why are you what's the big reason for optimism moving forward, or can this line correct itself? I don't know if the problems were more chemistry related, or if they were being taught incorrectly, or maybe these services were assessing these kids incorrectly. It seems to be a baffling question. I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
Well, Hoke's done, to begin, I think Hoke's done a really good job of recruiting. When he came to Ann Arbor, there was only 7 offensive linemen on scholarship, which is pretty pathetic from from an outsider standpoint. But it could be a mixture of many things. I know a lot of the offensive linemen were talking about how blocking schemes are much easier under Nussmeier compared to Borges. Even the running backs have said that as well. So, that could be contributing to it. But the exterior of the line was fantastic last year. You had 2 NFL first and third round draft picks in Taylor Lewan and Michael Schofield respectively. They were fantastic. They had great years. It's just the interior of the line that was absolutely pathetic. It was a revolving door of sorts. There was any type of set line. People kept getting shuffled in and out. You had a true freshman playing in Kyle Bosch for most of the year. So it didn't really allow that team and that offensive line to gel, which is, chemistry in an offensive line is huge. So, not when you don't have that, you're going to see issues like Michigan had a year ago. So heading into this year, they've done a lot of things to kind of correct the chemistry issue, which I think, was a bigger deal than people like to realize last year. I don't think there's anyone in particular, not to name any names, that might have caused it, but, it was just issues as a whole, with the offense not working, losing, almost losing to Akron, playing tough against UConn and stuff like that. But, they've done things like, shave their heads in team unity. Devin Gardner hosted a barbecue for the entire offense recently. And they went paintballing and, team events like that. So they've done the little things that kind of help chemistry, and maybe if things, if they can start getting a line that doesn't allow shuffling, they might be able to gel a little bit.
Yeah, I can't think of too many things that are better for relieving pent-up stress or unresolved issues with your colleagues than shooting them with the paintball gun. And I'm not even really kidding. Like, I can imagine, like, that could be cathartic. And have you paintballed before?
I have not. No.
No. Well, I've done it a couple of times. There's real fear when you're involved, because if you get shot with a paintball gun, unless you're getting hit right in the helmet, like, it actually hurts. You do not want to be shot. And if somebody if it's protecting you, like, I think Ohio State's position group might have done the same thing. Like, I applaud that. That seems to make sense to me. I'm curious here. So I'm looking at this depth chart, and I see a lot of not a lot of seniors, a lot of sophomores and redshirt freshmen. Who does Michigan think will be like your opening day offensive line?
Well, that hasn't really been set yet. There's a lot of weird kind of combinations going on right now. I think Tom Dienhart from BTN kind of released a starting today. What they had starting, I think it involved. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think it involved Mason Cole, true freshman, early enrollee, which is kind of frightening for a left tackle. You also had Eric Magnuson, Jack Miller starting at center because he'll be playing the first game due to Graham Glasgow's suspension. I'm trying to think of who else. David Dawson was there on the right side. I can't remember the other guy. The two biggest admissions are Ben Braden and Kyle Kalis. I think those two guys. Kyle Kalis, 5-star. Everyone knows about him from Michigan to Ohio State. Everyone knows what kind of ability he had coming out of high school, and seeing him not run with the first team is kind of alarming, especially considering how highly touted he was. But for Ben Braden as well, he can also be. I think he's a right tackle as well. So. The coaching staff has been pretty high on him since last year, but he didn't exactly see the field. But this year he's, setting himself up for some decent time. But, for some weird reason he's not starting with the ones today, which is extremely weird. But I digress. Brady Hoke and Nussmeier said yesterday that they would like to get a starting offensive line set this week, but a lot of it's still in the experimental stage. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if the group that's rolled out there in week 1 isn't necessarily the same group that's rolling out there in week 4 and week 5. But I think Ohio State is in a somewhat similar position with some of their offensive lineman position battles. But certainly it seems like the potential for this group is high, and even if they don't hit their stride this year, looking a year or two down the line, it could be a very, very imposing group. I have one other question here on this side of the ball, since I've been trying to follow this on Twitter, and that's we know that Michigan wants to run the football. There's some guys here in this group that are highly regarded, and correct me if I'm wrong about this. Am I right that Derek Green is running with the twos right now, that he's not projected to be the starting running back? Is that accurate?
Well, it's somewhat, yeah. They were saying that Derek Green was running with the twos, but I almost kind of see that from a perspective of trying to motivate him to, get up to that number 1 level. Yesterday during Media Day, Brady Hoke was mentioning that Devion Smith and Drake Johnson were running with the ones. They were more 1A, 1B. But today, Tom Dienhart mentioned that Drake Johnson was kind of competing for the remaining spot. So it's kind of weird right now. A lot of what the coaching staff says during pressers doesn't really equal out as to being the 100% truth. They like to keep their depth charts kind of secretive. But I see it as a motivational tool. I mean, if you look at Derek Green from last year to this year, he's made a significant improvement body-wise. He looks fantastic. He looks lean. He looks muscular. He looks ready to go. Brady Hoke joked yesterday that Derek Green looked more like him last year than a actual running back. So that kind of says a lot where he was at last year. Yeah,
far be it from me to ever criticize a player for his weight, seeing as I am a professional blogger. and would not pass the I think any kind of Michigan conditioning test. But suffice it to say, I think that might be a fair critique of where Derek Green was last year relative to how heralded he was, into his preparation level. So as a fan, would you prefer to see him starting, or would you rather see Smith or maybe some of these other people here get the bulk of the carries at the beginning?
Well, I followed Devion Smith and Derek Green's recruitment kind of closely when they were both being recruited by Michigan, and I was really high on Devion Smith's game. I really like what he brings. I mean, they're very, very similar, almost identical height and weight, so which is pretty awesome if you think about it, because you've got pretty almost exactly the same kind of runner with 1A and 1B, so it's kind of it's kind of like pick your poison, because you got one guy that can run you over, and then another guy that can come in that can run you over, and then you have Drake Johnson who can run right around you, and Justice Hayes who can do the same, and then potentially Ty Isaac who can do that as well. So as far as the number one guy or running back committee, I'm okay with whatever works for Michigan. There's a lot of possibilities that they can do right now, and I think, I honestly think De'Veon Smith's going to be the guy week one. I really think he's had a great camp. He's really transformed himself into a mean-looking running back, and hopefully that translates well into 2014.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's switch here to the other side of the ball, and I'm interested in hearing from your perspective here, outside of Jake Ryan, who I think a lot of people would have circled here as a potential difference maker here for Michigan on defense. I'd be interested in hearing some more here from your side about either what position groups or which players in particular on this side of the ball that you are most excited about and can think can make a big difference here for Michigan. Because on my side of the desk, it seems that there's a little bit more to be excited here about on the defense than with the offense, which has some question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the shuffling of the coaching staff and kind of a new mindset towards a more aggressive offense now that they have the depth, I think they're really going to set themselves up for a nice year. The linebackers are really deep, really talented. You've got at least, it goes at least two deep in all three spots. You got Jake Ryan moving to the middle, which when I talked to him yesterday, he said it was a more natural transition for him. He played a little bit in the middle in high school, but it's something that's coming easy to him, and it allows him to go right attack the football right in the middle without going around from either side. So the linebackers I'm particularly excited about. That they're deep. Defensive backs, obviously you've got, Jabril Peppers. I'm not a huge fan of talking about Peppers right now because he hasn't played a collegiate snap yet, but, he's the big deal around campus right now. But you also have guys like,
I've heard that name once or twice on Twitter.
Yeah, once or twice at least. But, you got guys like Blake Countess, Raymond Taylor returning, and you also have emerging guys like Jordan Lewis, who had a really, really nice spring. His spring game was excellent. I don't know if that's an testament to the new aggressive style that the defensive backs want to play, or if it was just poor offense. But he had a really great spring. That defensive backs are finally starting to get depth. That was something that bugged Michigan for quite some time, was depth in the defensive backs. So hopefully 2014 we'll see less of defensive backs getting burned on the deep ball, and we'll see more aggressive plays.
Yeah, I think that really Michigan defensively was not so bad last year, and I guess if you're going to circle one thing that was an issue was giving up big plays in the passing game, but a great way to alleviate that beyond making scheme adjustments is really just experience, and now that there's kind of a young group of four, and now you've got a lot more juniors, people who have played. So I wouldn't be surprised even without major X's and O's changes to see a little bit fewer long balls being connected here, or big plays due to a missed tackle somewhere within this particular position. Let me ask you something else, since generally speaking here about what expectations are like for what could be reasonably expected from this year. We on our side here at Land Grant, we had 15 of our writers complete this big questionnaire predictions across the Big Ten and everything, and Michigan was typically listed as most likely to finish third in the Big Ten East. We had a couple of people who had them as fourth, and kind of predicting anywhere from between seven and 9 wins. I know with you looking at the program here with a different angle and the schedule and who you have here, what kind of result are you expecting from Michigan?
That actually was pretty much what I've been thinking, anywhere between 7 to 9 wins and a third-place finish. I think Michigan's not quite ready to compete with the big boys of the Big Ten, and such as Ohio State and Michigan State right now. So they've got a very favorable home schedule that can set them up for that's at least I'm trying to think how many home games they have this year. 7. So I mean, that's at least 7 wins right there. And arguably their toughest opponent is Penn State during the night game, which Penn State's been giving Michigan some trouble the past 4 matchups. So that's the hardest one right there. And if he can get through that, I mean, that's easy 7 wins right there. And the 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 away slate kind of stinks. I mean, obviously you got to go back to Michigan State again for the second year in a row, and then you've got Ohio State away, and then Notre Dame away as well. So the big 3 big rivalry games are away, so that's going to be pretty difficult. So I go back and forth in my mind between what Michigan is going to do the rivalry games. I think Notre Dame is the one matchup where that looks like the most of a victory to me. I don't see them going into East Lansing and beating Michigan State, and I don't see them going to Columbus and beating Ohio State. Luckily, past few seasons, Michigan has put up a pretty decent fight against Ohio State, so that's encouraging. But as far as the record goes, I think anything above 9 wins is going to be a bonus this year. But that 7 to 9 wins is probably a pretty fair adjustment where this team stands right now.
I think that's fair, and one, I think you're being a little bit modest about the fight that Michigan put up. Like I was in the stands for Ohio State at Michigan last year, and I died 1,000 deaths. Let's not degenerate what Michigan did. That was more than a pretty good fight. It was an amazing game to watch, and they were very close. I'm looking at this, I'm personally a little bit higher on Indiana than I am Penn State. But if you wanted to argue Penn State, it's a tougher home game. I'm not gonna argue there. Indiana has a really good offense. They have a very solid offensive line that could be explosive, but they don't have anybody probably as good as Hackenberg or a coach like Frankel. So that could be tough. You may have heard this before. It's possible one of your fans or one of your commenters has brought this up, but Michigan's home schedule is not very good this year. And I've been told that people are a little bit hesitant to go spend a lot of money to go watch Utah and Minnesota, I guess as primary games. And I've seen a lot of people here complaining about Dave Brandon. From your perspective here, are you happy with the leadership and the direction of Michigan's athletic program from their athletic director? And if not, what kind of changes here would you make?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not really concerned with what Dave Brandon brings to the football Saturdays. I'm more concerned about the wins and losses at the end of the day. A lot of people like to complain about Dave Brandon and what he's done, what changes he's done, but that's just the changing of the times. People need to kind of realize the fact that this whole Michigan tradition thing, it's an old topic. I mean, I hate to say it. I know I'm probably going to get flamed for this big time, but it's something that people have to adjust to. Times are changing. It's not 1960s Woody Bow battles. It's not. It's 2014, moving on to 2015, and the times are changing. And the most important thing right now is wins and losses. And if they're winning, people are quiet. People are happy. So and now Michigan's been losing, and you're hearing the gripes and complaints about everything else. That's fair.
Balancing the desires of traditionalists is something, a challenge that I don't particularly envy. That's going to be that every Big Ten athletic director, I think, has to deal with, especially when you're trying to sell Maryland and Rutgers to an increasingly skeptical, not just fan base, but press corps. I did not make any friends with the Big Ten conference the last time I was in a meeting with some of those people, and I had insinuated that the Ohio State fan community was not thrilled with those additions. People were mad. So when you look at that and a crummy home slate and things being expensive, you could tolerate all of those, but when you're coupling all of that with Michigan not doing as well, I mean, obviously that makes things difficult. And if the Wolverines win 11 games, I don't think anybody's going to complain about Miami, Ohio, and App State, being on the slate. Speaking of leaders that people may not be thrilled with, this might be another story that's way bigger outside of Ann Arbor. But if you pick up, you click on a story from a national writer, or even some people who focus on the Big Ten, There's talk from people outside of Michigan that if the Wolverines don't noticeably improve this year, that Brady Hoke could find himself on the hot seat or is already on the hot seat. I have found that a lot of the Michigan people that I read are pushing that a little bit less. And Dave Brandon has I believe explicitly said that Brady Hoke's not on the hot seat. But from what you think, if the team goes 7-5 or 8-4 again and still struggles with some of the same things, do you think that Michigan might look at making a change, or is the cultural fit there so strong that it buys him a little bit more leeway?
Well, I think they're still trying to build that culture. I think, the mess that Rich Rod left, which is the Michigan program, is a lot worse than a lot of people realize. As far as Brady Hoke being on the hot seat, I've been asked this question millions of times, and I never really know how to answer it, truthfully. I personally, from a personal standpoint, I don't believe he's on the hot seat per se. Maybe he's on the lukewarm seat. I mean, just like every coach is. There's always pressure to win, no matter what program you coach for. So, as far as if there's another year like last year, there might be some kind of consideration of whether you need to make a change or not. But I think this year all depends on the improvements. I think how the team improves and also how the team loses, because last season I think Michigan lost by a total of 11 points out of all of their losses. So I mean, there's a big swing there as to if you get those 11 points back, what are they going to be like previously? But it's I guess it's just really tough to call, because I guess you will have to go through another crummy year to see what will happen. But I don't think Dave Brandon will pull the trigger. This is his hire. He's sticking with his guy, and I honestly feel like it's going to be something that he sticks with through the end.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, just for whatever my own opinion is worth, I would be surprised if Michigan made a change unless things got really bad. Like losing to Utah or Minnesota kind of bad.
Right.
Complete tire fire in one of the big TV games. I think that it's this is something that maybe we undersell a little bit here as fans, but there's a whole lot that goes on in these things beyond just wins and losses. How is somebody recruiting? Which administrator is supporting that person? You're right. This is Brandon's guy. He made that hire, and then a cultural fit. And I've heard this from a lot of people close to the program that for all of the the bad things that Rich Rodriguez did, to however you want to define the term Michigan man, Rodriguez was not that person. I mean, I think that he might charitably refer to himself as a redneck, and without any disparaging, pejorative things that come with it. And I think that's fair, and that's not how I would describe Ann Arbor, right? Or the culture necessarily around this institution. And Brady Hoke is for whoever you want to define Michigan man, seems to be that kind of person. And for a lot of administrations, that matters. So I mean, with all of those other things that are kind of working in his favor here, and with a lot of potential with this roster, I would be kind of shocked too. But weirder things here have happened. I guess just through all of that here, is there any what would be the other big question that you have as a fan as who follows this roster closely about Michigan football that we haven't gotten a chance to discuss more explicitly here so far?
That's an interesting question. I think, I mean, obviously you've got the largest question there is the offense. But any part of the secondary, I think the wide receivers, I think that's a big question there. You lose Jeremy Gallen, and he was pretty much the lifeblood of that offense last year. He was just simply incredible. So, you've got Devin Funchess, who converted from a tight end to wide receiver, and just like Jake Ryan, I think that's more of a natural transition. I think, Funchess has got the body type to be a wide receiver full time. I don't think he was necessarily, a fantastic blocker as a tight end. So I think the switch made sense, and there's already been some chemistry there between Gardner and Funchess. So I'm assuming that will carry over into 2014. But I think the biggest question mark is the depth or I'd rather say who was going to step up other than Funchess. There needs to be, more than just one guy that needs to, rack up the stats and make an impact. And there's a couple of guys who could. Amara Darball, he had a solid spring last year until he had a foot fracture, which had caused him to miss the entire season last year. He's returning, getting much of the same hype, if not more, coming into fall. Guys like Freddie Canteen, incoming freshman, early enrollee who's been, lighting it up since spring. He's definitely a potential guy. You've got Dennis Norfleet. He moved to the slot from a running back, speedy guy, nice fit there. Could be a potential dangerous player back there for Michigan. So I think that's the biggest question right now because Michigan needs playmakers on offense, and I think wide receiver is the best chance for that.
Okay, no, that's another fair question. I mean, we probably could have talked another 5 minutes about that group as well. That Michigan skill position players may not necessarily be the most settled, I suppose, within the league. Let me get you out of here on this. I had one last question here for you, and this is something that was we talked about, and I'm sure it's been passed around a lot as well. What are your thoughts on Michigan's new alternate uniforms that they'll be busting out this year?
They were growing on me when I saw what they looked like in the catalog. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of them what they looked like in the catalog, but then I realized that a lot of what the jerseys look like in catalogs don't necessarily equate to what they're going to look like in person. So I've seen them in person, and they're actually pretty sharp. As long as they keep the name Michigan off the back, I think it'll sit well with the fans, especially if it's a victory in the night game. I think in the grand scheme of things, alternate uniforms aren't a huge deal. People like to get on their soapbox and say, oh, Michigan doesn't wear alternate uniforms, but even though they've had 6 since 2011. But it's as long as they win, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I mean, granted, people are going to whine and complain about everything anyway because Michigan's losing. But I think people it'll grow on people because a lot of them haven't seen it in person, and when they do, I think they'll like them.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. It is early August, and we are desperate for football things to talk about. So when something that's vaguely football related comes out, and we can argue about it, we're going to do it. And I say we, not just talking about the esteemed football intellectuals here at Land Grant Holy Land. I'm talking just fans in general. So it's kind of an easy target. And if this happened in October when, we had a bunch of other things to discuss, maybe
right.
We wouldn't be flipping out as much. So for the sake of the Michigan faithful and for you, I hope that people really it does grow on people. And grow on them in a non-creepy Stockholm Syndrome kind of way, but a more genuine. These actually look okay on my television, and especially if it means there's a win. I really appreciate the time here that you've come on to chat about Michigan and help clear some things up here for us. Real quick, for the good people who are not as familiar with your work, where can we find you on Twitter and find your scribblings about Michigan on the internet?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Joshua Henschke, and I also do some tweeting on the Maize and Brew account at Maize and Brew. And you can also find my various ranting and raving and covering of the football beat on maizeandbrew.com.
All right. Hey, Joshua, thanks again. We appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be following what you are writing and talking with you again as the season goes closer because if there's Ohio State fans are definitely interested with what's going on here at Michigan. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet. That's Joshua here from Maize and Brew. I think Ohio State fans are really well served in general on the internet as far as blog coverage is concerned. Not just with Land Grant, you've got 11 Warriors, you've got the Ozone, you've got these some great work on some of the pay sites here, and I think a similar situation with Michigan. Maize and Brew is a great blog, MGO Blog's a great blog. There's a lot of good, non-newspaper, non-television Michigan coverage out there. So I definitely encourage you to give Maize and Brew a follow, and not just because they are part of our SB Nation corporate overlords, but because it's a solid site and will make you Ohio State fan or the Michigan fan who's joining us a little bit more well-informed. That's what we're about here. We're about doing public service. So again, this has been the Hangout in the Holy Land. I'm Matt Brown. You can follow us at Land Grant an email at matt.brown@sbnation.com. I imagine this is going to publish a little bit later here this week. We have a bunch of other podcasts. If you missed it, we broke down Iowa, we broke down Penn State, we broke down some Big Ten previews, and we've covered, I think at this point, most of the teams in the Big Ten East. I think it's just Indiana we haven't had a chance to get on the horn. A lot of the Big Ten West teams have been published. We're going to try to get a hold of some Virginia Tech guys to break down that a little bit closer as we get into that game. And other Ohio State news as it comes up, some more recruiting information, and maybe some live shows coming up. So if you want to actually call in and yell at me instead of just tweeting at me or emailing me, things that could possibly be arranged. But in the meantime, I'm Matt Brown. This has been the Hangout in the Holy Land. Thanks for listening. We'll be in touch soon. Go Bucks.